According to the book Nutritional Values of Exotic Dishes, a single 56-ounce serving of cooked llama meat contains 196 calories. This information is found on page 32. The young man did not object when I took him in the men's room of the gas station. He was standing at the urinal when I entered, and I stepped behind him and held a knife to his throat. I used my free hand to yank down his dress slacks, and then I pressed against him. "You want it, don't you?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. I made him bend over the side of the lone toilet, and although his buttocks were hairy and they repulsed me, I made him accept me the way my wife had.
What are you talking
All
about?
of me. He tensed, stiffened, and gasped with pain, and I felt around the front of his body to make sure he was not aroused. If he had been aroused, I would have had to have killed him. I slid fully in, and nearly all the way out 56 times before my hot seed shot into him, and with my knife pressed against his throat, I made him cry out. The exact same way that my wife had. I left him with only a slight cut across the upper throat, above the Adam's apple, and I took his clothes and put them in the trunk of my car, and later stuffed them with newspaper and made them into a scarecrow for my dead wife's dying garden. I hoped the young man was a doctor. I realized the importance of measurements even as a child. When my sister fell out of a tree in the yard, I measured the length of her legs and the total length of her body. Her legs were 20 inches long, her body was 4'5". My mother was 20 years old when she gave birth to my sister. My sister died when my father was 45. Requirements. I was required to pay for the knowledge gained from my sister's measurements. My sister had 2 arms and 2 legs. Therefore, I killed 2 cats and 2 dogs. My wife was Jewish. Before coming to the United States, her parents lived 196 miles from the nearest concentration camp, and 32 miles from the city where Adolf Hitler spent his youth. My wife was born in 1956. I showed Nadine a book on self-mutilation, letting her look at photographs of men who were so jaded, who so craved unique experience that they mutilated their genitalia. She was fascinated by the subject, and she seemed particularly interested in the photo of a man's penis that had been surgically bifurcated, and through which had been inserted a metal ring. She told me that the concept of self-mutilation appealed to her. She said that she had grown tired of sex, that all 3 of her orifices had been penetrated so frequently, so many times in so many ways, that there was no sensations that were new to her. Everything to which she submitted was either a repeat or a variation. I told her I would make her a new opening, a new hole. I took her to the forest, and I tied her to the cross stakes, and I used a knife to cut and carve a slit in her stomach, big enough to take me. She was still alive when I entered her, and her screams were not entirely of pain. She kept crying. My white semen mixed with her red blood, and it made pink. I wanted to kill the doctor who killed my wife, but I saw him only once after her death, and it was with a large crowd, and the opportunity did not rise ever again. So I rented a small apartment, and stocked the shelves with medical books, and arranged the furniture in a manner consistent with the way I believed the doctor would have arranged it. The apartment number was 56. I made friends with a young man who, save for the beard, resembled my wife's doctor fairly closely. I invited the young man into my apartment, smiling. Then I showed him the gun and told him to strip. He did so, and I made him put on the white physician's clothes I had bought. I forced him into the bathroom, made him shave, and then made him put on a surgical mask. I had purchased a puppy from the pet store that night before, and I had killed the animal by splitting its throat and draining its blood into a glass pitcher. I splashed the blood on the young man, and now the illusion was complete. He looked almost exactly like the doctor who had killed my wife. I had written out the lines I wanted the surrogate doctor to say why I killed him, and I typed them out and handed them to him bound in plastic. I cocked the pistol, handed the pages to the young man and told him to speak. The doctor. I killed your wife. Me. You wanted her to die. Doctor. She deserved to die. She was a bitch and a whore. Me. You killed my son. The doctor. I'm glad I did it. He was a son of a bitch and a son of a whore, and I knew I couldn't let him be born. Me. That means that you deserve to die. The doctor. Yes, you have the right to kill me. I killed your wife and son. It is only fair. I shot him in the groin, shot him in the mouth, shot him in the arms, shot him in the legs, and then I left him to die. In the newspaper article, it said he had bled to death 4 hours after the bullets had entered his body. He had been a stockbroker. I have clipped my toenails and fingernails once a week since my wife died. I save the clippings and I keep them in a plastic trash bag that I store underneath my bed. On the 10th anniversary of her death, on what would have been our son's 10th birthday, I will weigh the bag of nail clippings and then set the bag on fire. I will swallow 10 teaspoons of the ashes. The remainder I will bury with the body of my wife. I will use the information gained from the weighing to determine the date and manner of my own death. John F. Kennedy was assassinated on the date of my birth. My initials are JFK. Cataloging. My store has 16 non-fiction books containing information about llamas. There are 5 fiction books in which a llama plays an important role. All of these are children's books, and 3 of them are Hugh Lofting's Dr. Dolittle stories. I have killed 16 adults since my wife's death and 5 children. 3 of the children were siblings. The llama has changed my plans. The llama and the retarded child. I stare out the window of my store, at the dead animal, at the retarded boy next to it, at the occasional gawkers who pass by and stop to whisper. One of them I know. One of them over whom I have no control will eventually notify the authorities, and they will have to take the carcass away. I cannot let that happen. Or maybe I can. For the presence of the llama in my alley indicates that I have done wrong, and that a sacrifice is demanded. But who is to be sacrificed, the retarded boy or myself? Neither of us know, and we stare at each other. He outside next to the animal, me inside with my books. Though the dirty window, he looks vague, faded, although the llama still seems clearly defined. Is this a sign? I don't know. But I know I must make the decision quickly. I must act today, or tonight. I have measured the body of the llama. It is 4 feet, 10 inches long. Tomorrow is April 10th.